Hi there, it's your vagina speaking. I know sometimes I have a hard time hitting there when we get down, but OMG cream from Wisp is here to help. The instant arousal makes it easier to, It takes 2 minutes to order online, so let's give it a try. OMG. I literally just went to heaven. I'm gonna try that again. Go tell your friends though, get on Wisp. Order OMG cream online at hellowisp.com. That's hello, WISP.com, and have it delivered for free. Use code OMG for 15% off your first order.
This is Paige DeSorbo from Giggly Squad. Boost Mobile is no longer that prepaid wireless company you remember. They've invested billions into building their own 5G towers across America. With Boost Mobile's networks, customers enjoy the speed and service they'd expect from the big three. Plus, groundbreaking benefits you'd only get from a true challenger of the industry. Boost Mobile will let you try the network risk-free for 30 days. So visit your nearest Boost Mobile store or find us online at boostmobile.com today.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
I think Europe and all of us just need to count to 10 every time something gets said in the Oval Office, not to be reacting every single day to every single event or comment. It's very important that we try and discern a pattern of behaviour.
The speaking rights going to be able to get that.
I think
solved.
we're in this style is going to be a much more robust style.
You're very welcome to this very special episode of Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations. We're away from our usual studio in Allenwood in County Kildare. We're recording instead in the heart of Irish political life, the Department of the Taoiseach, Ryan Taoiseach in government buildings.
It's a change of venue that speaks volumes, Mary, because from Allenwood to the corridors of power, we're sitting with a man who has guided Ireland through some of its most challenging political landscapes. We've often discussed on this podcast the art of public service, the kind of commitment that goes beyond mere titles, carries deep, deep responsibility, and of course has profound consequences for all of us.
That is for sure. And today's guest embodies that spirit of dedicated service more than most. He has spent his career at the coalface of public life, navigating complex political terrains with remarkable composure, calm and vision. From his early years in politics through ministerial roles in foreign affairs, health, education, to now guiding the country as Taoiseach. His journey has been a testament to unwavering public commitment.
And a real dignity.
Yeah.
He's faced unprecedented challenges, a global pandemic, Brexit, complex coalition governance, and, of course, the politics of the day, stretching all the way from the United States to Russia, Ukraine, Gaza. He's demonstrated a resilience, an integrity, a decency, and a profound understanding of collaborative governance. We're so honoured to have Taoiseach Micheál Martin join us today on Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations. Taoiseach, it seems very strange to welcome you to your own department,
your own office.
You're welcome to our Changing Times podcast. To Fulcherot. And can we begin with your early life? You're born and reared Corkonian. So tell us about growing up in Cork. What kind of family life did you have there?
Well, I was born and reared in Turner's Cross, just immediately outside of the city centre, kind of the immediate suburb. And it was an idyllic childhood, working class community, probably the emerging 60s sort of era. I can remember the Beatles in the background as a child running around the street. A lot of games on the street. It was a real sporting area. Soccer, Gaelic football. And as kids, when the Six Nations were on, about now the Triple Crown at the time, we'd try and play rugby on concrete. And that ended up very badly. I have a crown in my front.
Still?
Still I have the crown because I broke my teeth at the bottom of a scrum on concrete. We didn't know what we were doing because we hadn't come from a rugby milieu, but you saw it on television and you were trying it out. But it was, I must say, at family, my parents, if you like, both of them instilled in us a kind of a real love of education and a desire to get on in life through education. They both had to leave school at 12 years of age, 13. They had, my father in particular, had a very difficult, challenging life, and that his parents died when he was about 14, a year after each other. So he then joined the Irish Army, at the time, and when he came out, he got a job in CIE as a lorry driver. He got Christy Ring's job as a lorry driver.
Christy Ring's job.
Christy Ring said to him, "I'm getting a job at Esso, Paddy. There's a job for me down in CIE." They played together with St. Nick's and Glen Rovers.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And then his three brothers, or two of his brothers, early on had been in the British Army during World War II, and one was in a prisoner of war camp in Shanghai Prison. And his older sister, Maura, who must have only been 17, 18 years of age, kept the family together. Nancy, the younger sister, would have been sent to a British Army orphanage in Cove. And the younger brother, Maura, looked after. And she tried to get my father, Paddy, back from Castle Connell, where he was with the Irish Army during the emergency, as it's called. So I think a lot of resilience came through that side of the family.
He had it tough.
Very, very tough. And my mother would always say to us, "You are his first real family," with kids, growing up in that sort of environment. My mother came from East Cork, tenant farmer kind of background. A lot of that community from Lisgood, Liam, Lara came to the city, and a lot settled around Turner's Cross, Ballyfian. It's very interesting. But my mother's people were, I call them, instinctive Republicans. My grandparents were on my mother's side in the War of Independence. My grandmother in particular, my mother often said she died too young, 2 years of age when she died, but she was the matriarch or the firebrand, and she would have been involved in rescuing Sean Moylan from the mental hospital in a way, because Sean Moylan, when he was first arrested, turns to McSweeney and someone said to him, "Look, play mad, just go ranting and raving in the Cork prison. You'll be sent to the asylum."
Wow.
To the mental health hospital at the time, and my grandmother was a nurse there, and she walked him out the back, kind of taking her patient for a walk, and he hopped over the wall. That kind of folklore we were reared on from the mother's side, it's kind of. And but she was very political, and the mother often says, "That's where you got this," sort of.
Well, Micheál, when you're talking about your father and your mother's family as well, and all of the values and the experiences they had, do you think they are the things that shaped you as you were growing up as a young man before even entering politics?
I think
These
so,
were
no
kind
question.
of simmering around in your...
Yeah, no question. And when you look back and reflect, current affairs was always a topic in our house. And then we went to the local school, Scull Crease the primary, and it's Closh Crease. The Presentation brothers came to Turner's Cross. The Presentation sisters, Nan O'Neill, had been in the South Parish, which is the adjacent parish. And so you look back on it, you say the Dun O'Malley revolution of opening up second level education, we were the first generation to benefit from that. And Crease had a particular influence on me, very happy influence, I have to say. And we went through all the challenges that people have going to school, but teachers did influence me along with my parents. And that time, we were so near the school, all kids, the lunch break was a bit longer. We all ran home for lunch, for the dinner of the day. And we'd run back then to try and get a game of football for about 10 or 15 minutes in the yard. But every time we went home, if the father was at home, the 1 o'clock news was on. So you had the bacon and cabbage, listen to the news quick. And I look back, the father always had a kind of an insightful comment to make about something that would happen on the news. That went in, and I think that all shaped me. First of all, an interest in current affairs, as we'd call it, or the news, so to speak. There's only one channel, and it's hard
just
to look
interesting.
back.
And just as a total aside, the way Irish people are always told, "My goodness, you eat so fast." That's probably the reason, because we had a half an hour or so for lunch, came home, ate it, and wanted to get back to the yard before the bell
That
rang.
explains. Mary to this day said, "Will you slow down?"
I think all of our generation are the same.
That is very true, yeah. And then I had two teachers I often talk about. Tom Land in 6th class in primary school was a revelation in the sense that he, at the time you had to do entrance exams to get into the second level or get the class, high class, low class. Tom Land wasn't interested in that at all. So he enabled me. I was doing radio programs at 12 years of age, kind of around the world in 15 minutes, around Europe in 15 minutes with a colleague. And he encouraged me to do recordings, do your research. And it was a very good education. My brother, twin brother, Padraig, was doing science type stuff. He was making crystal set to create the first radio, make your own radio. And I'd be he called me up then at night, Paddy would, and say, "Look, I think I got it. Will you throw the wire down?" And I wouldn't have a bull's notion of all that kind of stuff. I would, and like the way we grew up, there was another great teacher, Liam Burns. He was a fantastic maths teacher. Maths wasn't my strongest suit. But I always remember 5 or 6 kids would have to get together to try and work out the solutions to the maths, right? So Paddy would go off. We're all very close, living together at the time. You had 5 kids a family, some kids would have 10. That's the kind of community. Meanwhile, I'd be writing 2 English essays. I was very good at the English. I'd write an essay for Paddy, and I'd write my own essay.
And they couldn't be the same.
And Paddy would come back with the maths solution.
It sounds like a good arrangement.
Very collaborative.
Yeah.
Very collaborative, very early on.
Not everybody is lucky enough to be born a twin.
No. The only unfortunate is that later on in life, we weren't identical. If we were identical, he could have canvassed half the constituency and maybe the other half.
Good point. He probably canvassed it anyway.
Yeah, well, he did.
He did.
Yeah. But it was a nice upbringing. We had 5 in the family, my 2 sisters, Mairead and Eileen. Sean was the older brother, and there was the twins after that. And we joined Nemo Rangers, was our local GA club, which at the same time, if you like, in the late 60s, Nemo is becoming a big club now.
Important now.
At the time, it had won nothing. It won its first county championship in the early 70s, I think 71, 72. And then went on to win 7 All-Ireland club medals. And and that was connected to Cree Street. So it was a beautiful era to grow up in from a sporting point of view.
Yeah.
Cork Celtic was our soccer club. We lived around the corner. We'd go around to Turner's Cross soccer pitch 2 or 3 nights a week to watch them train. Evergreen United would have been a predecessor. So there was a very strong soccer tradition. And I remember when Manchester United won the 68 European Cup, I can still vividly remember all of the neighbours coming out onto the street to celebrate. And it was a bit like, I don't know if you ever read Paddy Clark, Ha Ha Ha.
Oh, yes.
There was a great moment in that book which kind of, the young lad runs out and does a lap of the front garden and gets back in time for the action replay. So that match is forever indelibly sort of imprinted in my mind,
I can remember being really impressed by that European Cup win because we were all fans of all girls my age were fans of Georgie Best.
Of course, from my home city, may I say?
Absolutely.
Yes.
What a remarkable footballer.
Oh my God.
Wasn't he?
He was also very good looking, Taoiseach, from the point of view of, from a teenage girl's point of view.
Was he now?
Oh, he was.
Are you admitting this now? Are you?
Yeah, we had pictures of him up on the bedroom wall.
You can see that everywhere. If you look back on his life or read or look on a documentary on his life.
I know.
It's heartbreaking.
That is very
ended,
evident in terms of his attraction to people and so on like that,
Can I ask you about your dad, your father, because he was clearly a significant influence on you, and I'm really taken by his own personal story. The hardship that he had as a young man growing up and the scattering of his family. And now he's a dad himself. What kind of dad? Talk to us about the kind of dad he was. Was he huggy wuggy? Was he I love you guys? Was he
not huggy muggy? But he was. I think, as I say, he was very. Look, he was everywhere with us. No, what's interesting is he did shift work a lot because he was a bus driver, and he always would work on a Sunday because you get double time on a Sunday, Mary copped it on years later. But anyway, that's a different matter about going to mass and things like that. And he said, "Penny, it's just funny." But I think he also then sport was his big thing. He was a boxer early in life. In the army, when he went as a young kid, he went in at about 15.
And he was a good boxer, by all accounts.
Yeah, he boxed with Ireland, and so around the father, he was a great storyteller. He played Gaelic football with Jack Lynch, with Chris Turing, and that great kind of era of sports stars in the Cork variety at that time. And he, a number of things that kind of came to us through him in some respects, the sport. And he loved the lore of sport. There was a fabulous moment later on in life when we all ended up in Collins Barracks in Cork, in the army there, where he'd been invited up with 2 or 3 others, and it got bigger. And it was an afternoon of storytelling about his life in the army, but also some boxing exploits, some great stories with Christy Ring. He'd come back from boxing with Ireland in Italy and get criticised by Christy in terms of his football performance the following weekend and how the father would respond. I can't go into it here in too much detail. He was entertaining, and he was very good fun. And his love for us was manifest. He'd be up doing the breakfast. He would have your breakfast. In the morning, he was very there was certain things in life, food that you were kind of looked after that way. You wouldn't go without eating. Later on in college life, when I was a student in UCC, if it was raining, at that time he'd become an inspector with CIE, and himself and another inspector would sort of just timely come around and say, Micheál, look, we'll give you a lift up. And I met all the bus inspectors through, and the joke in the house afterwards was, that was your first state car. So, and I had great banter with some of the fellow workers and inspectors. He formed the CIE Social Welfare Club, which was, and I have vivid memories of him with 4 or 5 CIE workers in the front room of our house, putting money into envelopes for widows, and particularly widows with orphans, as they call it at the time.
Great social conscience.
He had a very strong social conscience. That was very, very strong in him. And that sense of vulnerability of others. And I often wonder, he had a sense of the vulnerability of the child. And I remember when he died and passed away at the funeral, a bus driver came up to me and said, he just said to me 2 things. He said, you're coming in now, he says, a bus driver, never leave a child on the side of the road. Make sure that child gets home. And he was always big into safety, and he'd watched accidents, and he'd say to us, look, when you're passing out a bus in a car, just watch for the school child who's going to run across in excitement. He had, I don't know, was that born out of his own experiences as a child? I just don't know. But he had a razor-like focus on safety, maybe sometimes we would say too much so, on hygiene and cleanliness and all of that. So yeah, he had a profound impact on us.
What age was he when he died?
He was 88, which wasn't too bad. Yeah.
Was he a happy man?
He was. Yeah, very happy man. Yeah. And as in the storytelling, so he loved that. You know? But he gave me great insights into politics. You know,
and because you have held so many wonderful ministries, and you've made such a great contribution as a consummate public servant, did he ever take you aside and tell you how proud he was of you?
We weren't allowed to use the word proud. My mother was kind of quite she wasn't fanatic. She was religious enough, but not fanatically or fundamentally. But she said to me, "Don't ever use the word proud now. 7 deadly." You know that thing about the 7 deadly sins?
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah.
So like, we could, and to this day, people laugh at me. I can't use the word proud because of the mother.
It was the other one that children weren't allowed to use the word bored. So I'll give you something to do now if you're bored.
That would be a sin, like bored, like in the sense that you should never be bored. My mother would talk for Ireland at times, and the memory that neighbours have is her at the gate. We're in a terraced house, and
standing over the gate,
having a chat as people came from work or whatever like that.
Wonderful sense of community.
But there was always I remember there was a friend of her, a traveller woman, who called to the house every now and again. And okay, the mother might have some old clothes or some things, but it wasn't really about that. Like, the mother would talk to me afterwards and say the challenges that woman has in the family and her concerns. So it was a listening sounding puss, which I think gave me that sense of, I don't ever close a door on people. And I'm never into stereotyping people, no matter what, you know. And I find that's kind of, the world has gone harsher that way today than maybe it was.
You've always said that the essence of leadership is listening, but moving on from your own family growing up, tell us a little bit about your family. Your wife is Mary, and you have 5 children, but you've had terrible loss and terrible tragedy with 2, which is a very, very difficult thing for anybody to suffer. One child dying, but to have 2.
Yeah, it's devastating. It's very hard. You don't ever get over that.
What were the circumstances?
Well, Rory died from a cot death. And
he was only little, probably a few weeks old.
5 weeks old, yeah.
Wow, how awful.
And, you know, I can remember the moment I was in Dublin. So Mary rang.
Mary.
He had, luckily, our sister-in-law Anne was in the house as well. So Micheál and Eva were 2. Micheál was 4 and Eva was 2. So they were protected in the sense, because psychologically afterwards the trauma of that in front can have an impact and so on. And it does have impact, clearly. But I always say I was, and still am, of the optimistic side. Mary would always say, you always looks on the kind of the brighter side of life is best. But that was the first major, real huge traumatic hit that I had
knock optimism
that I had not been expecting. And Mary would say to me afterwards, you know, you do realise a couple of years ago you were thinking of packing up at that stage, kind of thing.
Yeah, and you were you?
I can't remember it quite when Mary says you were really wondering, you know, because I had that sense, you know, of missing Rory in the sense of, you know, because I was waiting for the summer, to come, and we'd have better times and so on like that. But it wasn't to be.
And then you had to face little Lena's death. Lena's death. Tell us about her. She was, what age was she?
Lena was just about on her 8th birthday. Mm-hmm. She was a beautiful child. Lena was absolutely fabulous. Mm-hmm. We adore Lena. In many ways, she made the family too. Mm-hmm. So it was quite devastating.
And hers was sudden. Hers was a sudden.
Well, we didn't expect it.
No, you weren't prepared.
We weren't prepared for that at all. Not at all, and in no circumstances.
Yeah. So that's two.
Yeah.
The small children. Two wee ones that completely unprepared that you've had to carry with you now. Mm. As you said, there's no way that's going to ever leave you. Ever.
No, and look, you could be out wandering, walking on your own, and you'll come to him. Mm-hmm. There could be a moment that you just sort of your thoughts take you somewhere, and there could be tears come down your eyes. That just happens. I think Mary's been fantastic in the sense of how, like Mary would have said to the kids and everyone, look, we all do grief differently. Every person's an individual. It's important that you understand that. There's no uniform way of grieving. But we do go to the graves, both in the same grave. So we visit at key moments of the year.
And you and Mary are very united in yourselves.
Absolutely. And then Mary did things like, it's interesting for others as well. We have a calendar every year and Lena is in the calendar, photographs. It helps, because we come into our room or kitchen, Lena's there.
Keeps her present.
Yeah, her presence is always there and so on like that. And I think you have to keep going. And in different walks, like when I was Minister for Health, I often recall families who went through a lot of trauma. Some, and maybe in circumstances in health cases or whatever, people might have issues of treatment and so on like that. But my view is you have to keep going for the living as well. What I mean by that is you just have to keep going and not to let the trauma be the dominant for all your life, And we got some tremendous support from people. I mean, our families were fantastic. Our brothers, or my brothers and sisters, and Mary's. Mm-hmm. So we were very, very lucky. Mm-hmm. And our friends, we had some very long-standing friends outside of politics, and they were there for us. And that friendship helped us as well come through.
How did the other little ones help you? Because you had other children.
Well, I always say
to be reared.
When Rory died, that's what saved us. No doubt about it. You had to get up. You just had to get up the following morning.
Somebody had to make the breakfast.
For Micheál and
somebody had to get the kids
make the breakfast.
Keep going.
Play games and just keep going. The very important thing for anybody going through grieving, I think, is to get out and about again. Hard, but just walk the countryside. Walking is very important, I think. Get contact with nature. Just routine is very important. I wouldn't rush back to work, I'd say to people, but I would say to people that as soon as you can, to give yourself a bit of space, but then develop a routine in life which will help you cope.
Yeah. Well, those tragedies would knock your optimism, but you as you say, you kept going. It would knock your faith also. Did it have that kind of an effect?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it knocked me for a long time. I got up again, and it was a very difficult time politically. It was the time of the crash and everything. Right. It was just like that was the worst moment of our lives, and I could have left at that stage of politics. I'd have had a full pension and all the rest of it, done all of that and go another way. But something kept saying to me, it could have been the father's experience, or that spirit that comes from the Martin side, or you just don't lie down kind of thing. You pick yourself up again and keep going, and it does. You ask why us, why me, Yeah. But that's why to this day when I hear of a child dying or a child being killed, I'd say the two of us would just kind of blink and say, oh my God, you're thinking of the parents and you're thinking of the family somewhere in the country or somewhere else.
You know the journey that's ahead
gone through terrible trauma.
Yeah. Very difficult.
You've been involved in politics since you were, 18, 19 maybe? Maybe before?
Well, I suppose, you're right. In student politics,
In student politics, and I mean, as you said yourself, the news was on in the house every day, so it was a political house in the sense that there was a great interest in what was going on in the world. And then with the social conscience that your parents had, that was quietly educating you for the public servant you would become. So as you look back over that sweep back down to the young fella, the young teenager, is there something in particular over that? I'm not going to use the word proud in deference to your mummy, but is there something that you look and you say, I'm glad I did that. That's something that lifts my heart.
There's a lot.
Good.
There's a lot. I find public life very rewarding. It can be frustrating. Could I just say, like that, Northern Ireland was a big catalyst. Mm-hmm. Remember, I made Chairs of Age in 68. I see all of that unfolding, civil rights, Bloody Sunday. And I'm fascinated by the North. And then I got onto UCC. I visit the North, Belfast for the first time as a 21-year-old student in the middle of the hunger strikes. We visit all of the political parties and social workers, myself and 3 others. And that changed my mind about the North suddenly, because we were in the safe, sort of nice rhetorical view in the South, or kind of rhetoric of United Ireland and Brit South and all that kind of stuff. Then when I met everybody, but the unionist families I met gave me a different perspective on their uncles being shot because of the uniform, they would say to me, or murdered, they'd use it for, and began thinking. So Northern Ireland was a catalyst, and I can recall in UCC, when in the middle of the hunger strike period, very heated debates in the restaurant, 500 or 600 people participating. So that certainly was a factor. And therefore, when I went into government, eventually I went into politics and got elected and so on. Being in a government where the Good Friday Agreement happened, you had to pinch yourself. Because I was following this all my life. I read every book that had to be read on the North. And I'm suddenly saying, I don't believe this. Like, we actually have peace. And because you recall in the 70s, you didn't really see it happening. You didn't quite see it happening in the 80s either. And actually, we had become a bit immune to, there'll be a bomb, there'll be an explosion, there'll be something, and it's on the radio or the television. So that is something that I think is a lifelong, and I've been committed to that as a politician in education at the time. I remember meeting Martin McGuinness, who was then Minister for Education, First Minister for Education in the new Assembly and so on like that. And to this day now, I've initiated Shared Island initiative in 2020, which is I'm really, really happy about. And we did it in a low radar, or below the radar. We didn't go shouting and roaring about it. It has got civic acceptance across the board, which is important. It's not a Trojan horse, but it is building connectivity, understanding, dialogue and trust. And I'm particularly pleased with that initiative. And the programme for government, we insisted there would be another $1 billion allocated out to 2035 to facilitate more connectivity and engagement. Mm-hmm. Smoking ban is obviously one that grows on me.
First in the world, wasn't it?
The first in the world at the time.
Yeah.
And everybody said it wouldn't work.
Absolutely.
And it was self-policing.
It was a great journey.
It was a great self-policing, almost overnight, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It really,
it was. Well, people wanted it.
People wanted it.
The other area, and that we did I did a lot of good work in education and special needs in 1998. Where we brought in a memorandum of an automatic right to pupil-teacher ratio for children with special needs and so on. And a lot of progress was made then. That said, not enough. And over the years, that has kind of come back a bit, which has annoyed me and angered me. And it's one of the unfinished business that I'm about as Taoiseach now. And I was very unhappy that we didn't make the kind of progress I wanted to make in special needs and disabilities. So in this government, I've made it a very key priority to comprehensively deal with the disability issue, from availability of therapists to sufficiency of school places. Now, part of the reason is, even though it's demonstrable the progress that has been made in terms of number of special needs assistants, special classes, the population has grown dramatically. The percentage of the population that is identifying as having a disability or a special additional need is growing also, and particularly neurodiversity and autism. And therefore, but we have to ensure that every child born and every child has the same entitlement to education. It will demand extra resources and so on like that. So that is a big focus of mine and others in the government on this occasion. So I don't want to just focus on all the achievements. There's things we still have to do.
But there was also, while you were Minister for Education, something that I think was hugely important was the introduction of the Leaving Cert Applied, which gave confidence to so many young students who were not going to be academic, who were always looking at kind of failure when it came to the Leaving Cert, and the Leaving Cert applied, which gives them, children of lesser academic ability, the possibility to shine. And I just think it's so important.
Absolutely. Like there were kids leaving school, secondary school without certification, without the capacity.
And a sense of failure.
Yeah. And without the capacity to progress.
Yeah.
Like the great revolution, I think, in education, which health still has to do, is, and I remember Dick Langford, who was the CEO of the VC in Cork, and he was the first head of Taoiseach initially, and then the qualifications framework. And he said to me, the whole issue here, he said, is about the learner. Education is about the learner, not the institution. It doesn't matter where you got your degree, it's the fact that the degree is recognised everywhere. And so we should be facilitating the learner on the journey. Could be different colleges by the time you finish. And I think if we could do the same in health, if you look at all the big roads in health, it's about institutions. It's about Vincent's and Holles Street. Yeah. Not about the woman who's about to give birth, or a woman with gynae issues and so on like that. And I think health still has to, let's make huge progress, but it still has to, so when we talk about maternity hospitals and where we build them, the whole row about the Children's Hospital was about institutional. If we're honest, Crumlin, Temple Street, Mater, James's. And we really have to come back out of that and say, look, we might build a new institution, but the bottom line, we're only doing it because of the patient and the children and the women and so on like that.
Listening to you talk about things like that, it really all goes back, doesn't it, to the way you grew up and the values that were given to you, watching your father and that sense of, I suppose, other people and
absolutely,
looking after people, and that the service is, and the provision is what's important.
Absolutely, and a sense of community,
And now, of course, where two or more are gathered. Yes, there's a lot of talk about housing and the housing crisis. And how does that impact you at the moment?
That's the biggest issue. It's very, very frustrating.
I'd say you can't walk down the street without somebody asking you about it or telling you.
But I mean, for young people today to be able to buy a house is extremely, extremely difficult at an affordable price. What's frustrating, I think, our delivery. Modern governments have tied themselves up a bit in straitjackets too, in terms of agencies, in terms of assessments, reviews, and regulators, and all the rest of it. And there are times when you get impatient. Sometimes I look in the US and I say, the use of the executive order isn't a bad thing from time to time. And, we've got to get the balance right. And I had this chat with Keir Starmer recently, the British Prime Minister. He was saying something similar. So take offshore wind. That is a big issue. Take housing. Take planning. Planning is taking years. Yet kids can't get houses. We all have to balance our decision making. And I understand the right is there, of course, to object and so on like that, but we have to get it right. Do we really have to go to judicial reviews all the way to the High Court, which will, without question, prolong and add cost? Because young people need housing. Our population is growing. We can't all be comfortable in our own locations. We've got to think of others, and the most important social issue facing us, and it's a crisis, is housing.
Do you have faith that we'll crack that?
I do, yeah, I do. But we have to do it on all fronts, and we do need private sector investment. The state will be hugely involved. The storm winds are blowing in terms of tariffs, and that could affect the economic model in Ireland, so we've got to be conscious of that. But we do have resources, but it's the time it's taking to get delivery.
The momentum.
Just get through all the various hoops and sort of the variety of sort of challenges that I'd say anybody has to do to get a development underway now.
Taoiseach, we're actually recording this conversation on the day that you have just returned from Paris. You must have had a very early start from the summit for support for Ukraine. And over the years, you've met so many world leaders. How do you approach these meetings? And also, do you feel that? I suppose the word we would use is we're well got on the international stage? Yeah,
I think we are well respected. We have an excellent diplomatic service, and I was very honoured to work as a foreign minister twice now. And I have great respect for our diplomatic team. And the manner of recruitment of that team has been very important down through the years, and I hope it doesn't change too much. Because we have high calibre people who are self-reliant the embassies and so on like that, and in the Department of Foreign Affairs and in the Department of Taoiseach. So we are well prepared. If you read your briefs and talk, invariably we have meetings in advance. We discuss things. We discuss the personalities we are meeting, understanding what makes people tick, how to engage, and you build up trust and confidence first. You don't go in barring down the door and say, I want A, B, C, and D. You've got to win people's confidence. Got to understand your own limitations. We're a small nation. And how you can navigate in a debate to move things in your direction. And also be a problem solver. And when I was on the European Council the last time as Taoiseach, I think I would have earned the reputation of being someone who wanted to solve problems, not digging one's heels in, and be a constructive sort of partner in terms of dealing with the issue of the day. We dealt with COVID, I think, very well at the European Union level because of that collective sense. It's the first time ever Europe borrowed money collectively. I supported that, even though Ireland was a net contributor, because I think it was overall in the best interest of Europe. And we sell all our goods and services into the European market. So we benefit ultimately from it.
So you build relationships.
You build relationships. I like that part of the work. I've met different leaders and I take their measure. I even join the meetings. And some can be difficult in the beginning because some... I won't name names of words, because one meeting I went into last year in Africa, they were saying, well, it's going to be very difficult now, you know. They were very annoyed with what we did in the Security Council and so on like that. And it was an intriguing meeting because, it did. I remember, I think I hope the Secretary General doesn't mind. He said, you were like trying to do a four-man alley fight there. He said, you were on the ropes there for the first couple of rounds. But he said, what a great finish.
We learned a thing or two from your dad.
We cracked it basically during the meeting and we kind of became friends during the meeting and job done. But I enjoy that kind of thing. And also learning, I mean, I remember meeting Cyril Ramaphosa just about 2 or 3 years ago. And we ended up talking about decommissioning in Barnes in Ireland. And he was kind of telling us about his experiences. Now looking back with some humour about his engagements on all of that at the time. With others. And that, of course, underlines the importance of international collaboration. Because if you think about it, in that peace process, we relied, the Finns at the Sari and others came to help. The United States came to help.
Americans,
So we have to help too.
Union.
And one of the big takeaways from that is we're now helping in the Colombian peace process. We were instrumental. 3 young diplomats, young women diplomats, working with UN and Irish diplomats, very involved in the Mozambican peace process. Kind of came across 3 years ago when I was out there. Fantastic work. And one of the head women of the Secretariat, who was deputy, I can't think of her name now, said to me, I would clone Irish diplomats if I could. Their work ethic, very good English, she said, and they don't have attitude. In other words, they're not arrogant or whatever.
And they're a professional core.
And they're professional. And she was very thankful and appreciative of the contribution they made. So I think we can make that contribution if we're invited and if people think we can add value because of our own experience of conflict in the peace process.
What about diplomacy at home this week?
Wow, that's a haymaker.
Wow.
But I think
the speaking rights and it all.
Yeah,
are you going to be able to get that?
I think we're in this style is going to be a much more robust style than the last style.
That's a nice way of putting it, Taoiseach.
I mean, I think, look, I don't want to get too political there in the podcast.
Are you resigned to your situation in that regard?
I'm fully resigned to it and had been since the beginning because it was declared in advance that there's going to be a different opposition to what we might have experienced in the past. I think we can work it out. I think ultimately, I think my own personal view is I think it's been disproportionate in terms of what actually has been eventually resolved. It took 20 hours of discussions. Mary Butler has been a very effective chief whip. But I think ultimately, the members of the House, no matter what party they are members of, want to be involved in committees, want to get on with the job and want to get on with work.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
Long gone are the days of waiting to be seen in a doctor's office only to have that awkward conversation with your healthcare provider. Wisp gives you access to sexual and reproductive healthcare from the comfort of your home. Get treatment for BV, yeast infections, UTIs, and much more delivered directly to your home or ready for pickup at your local pharmacy in less than 3 hours. The best part? Wisp is discreet, convenient, and you don't need medical insurance to receive care or prescription medication. Visit us today at hellowisp.com.
Top reasons your dog wants you to move to Ohio. Amazing dog parks to stretch your legs. All 4 of them. Dog-friendly patios. Even gourmet hot dogs loaded with the good stuff. Bon appetit. And Ohio has so many high-paying jobs, you'll be top dog in no time. Jobs in technology, engineering, science, advanced manufacturing, and more. The career you want and a life you'll love. Have it all in the heart of it all. Go to callohiohome.com.
When I started as a Dáil deputy, there was no leaders' questions for the opposition. Things are far better now than they were for the opposition, say, in the past, in the sense that the Dáil has got more resources, far more committees, far greater opportunities than ever before. But I do have a fundamental view, and I would be a very strong parliamentarian. That's what I'm wedded to, parliamentarianism. Every deputy has to have a voice, irrespective of who you belong to. And even with the present arrangements, there are some still who don't, like some of the non-aligned, as they're called. And these are not the regional independents, but there's 3 or 4 TDs who are not members of anything. And they've no say at all. Like, that's not fair, I don't think.
It's not fair to their constituents, is it?
No, it's not.
Yeah.
You know,
where's their voice?
You know, like there's about 2 or 3 at the moment who are not aligned to anybody. You know, and so I think we're going to have to keep engaging. Ultimately, the Dáil has to work, unless people don't want it to work.
Well, you're optimistic. That's part of your optimism. You're always optimistic. Taoiseach, we're in the presence of a most distinguished former Uachtarán Héireann. Oh, absolutely. Now, nobody could say anything else.
Mary.
But there is an upcoming presidential election, and there is a lot of talk about various candidates, including Conor McGregor.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we are in the presence of a very distinguished President of Ireland, Mary Micheál. And again, I was a minister when you were president, and I'll always remember the work you did on the North with Martin in terms of bringing people quietly to the Áras.
Building bridges.
Bridges. I think it was a phenomenal piece of work at the time, and it achieved a lot. And some of the people you brought on, I became friendly with, particularly in the loyalist side.
And Cork stole the show with Her Majesty the Queen's visit.
We did.
Oh, yeah,
we did. Jan,
completely stole the show.
What would you expect?
Nothing less. Nothing
well,
less.
it's very interesting because Dublin looked a bit kind of heavy security, very kind of stiff. Everyone's kind of nervous in Dublin. Then when you get to Cork, it all kind of
it was all kind of
informal.
For goodness sake.
Enjoy it.
And it was.
And the English market, it kind of was fantastic.
Brilliant.
It was fantastic.
It was brilliant.
Market.
I love that. Was Pat O'Connor? Was it?
Pat O'Connell. Pat O'Connell, the fishmonger.
Sorry, Pat O'Connell. When that horrible fish in the display, and the Queen asked him the name of it, and he said it was so ugly they called it the mother-in-law. That's right. Yeah, that was brilliant.
Oh, he's such a character.
Where else would you get that? Where else would you get?
He's very witty. Yeah. Cork people have wit.
They have.
We know that. Yeah, that's for sure.
Brain power.
But I'm not dodging the question very.
But it's always such a volatile.
If anybody wants to apply, but it's a difficult journey because you have to get 4 county councils, I think. You have to get 20 Dáil deputies as an alternative route in. So I'm not so sure what the agenda is, whether he really is or isn't interested. That's so I don't feed it. So there are plenty of others who apparently are indicating, and I think there are some who haven't indicated yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Would you think about it yourself?
No. If I wanted to be president, and I would not have run for the Dáil, basically, or certainly would not have become Taoiseach, because when you run for the Dáil, you are saying to the people of Cork South Central, I want to serve you for the next 5 years.
Again, yeah.
That kind of is an issue for me, anyway. And then I was fortunate to become Taoiseach again. So my commitment is to that now, and to do the best job I can on the issues that face the country, as we discussed, housing and disability and the economic challenges that are definitely going to come our way. So I think we'll know by the summer. And I think, given previous experiences, and you'd know a thing or two about this, it might be a shorter campaign. Because the campaign is probably the most difficult and vicious campaigns
of all.
It
is.
Inexplicably, in my view.
Is it because it's just based on personality?
Yes,
pretty much.
And I think people set up this kind of idea that you have to be 100% virtuous and without a flaw. I think some terrible things were done in the past. I thought David Norris, the fate of David Norris was quite shocking.
Appalling.
Mary Davis and others.
Coming down the line, and it feeds in a way to the issue of what kind of person we would like to see, for example, in Áras an Uachtaráin for the next 7 years, because coming down the line at some stage in the future, though there's the ongoing conversation about it, and that is the question of the ending of partition and whether there might be a referendum in the north with the demographics veering away from the old kind of unionist Protestant British hegemony, breaking that down. And the Good Friday Agreement, part and parcel of the Good Friday Agreement, in deference to those who want a united Ireland, is that built into it is the possibility of asking that question. So in your view, with that question there and the work that you've been doing, the brilliant work you've been doing with the Shared Island Initiative, what kind of person should be in that job going forward, who can ride out and smooth out, if you like, the questions that are going to be asked of all of us in the coming years?
I think, again, there's two things. I think the Irish people are have very good judgment when it comes to the presidency. They have a sense of what the office can do and the limitations of the office. And I always have a view that the centre ground of Irish political life wants somebody who will represent the country well and with dignity, and will have a sort of a unifying persona, and that has the capacity to reach out. So I think that's ultimately the criteria or the characteristics that people look in a future president of Ireland. That's my sense of it. There'll be lots of debate, there'll be lots of noise, but when it comes down to the last 48 hours, people kind of say they have an idea in their mind who really fits the bill among the candidates for presidency. Competency goes into it and all of that, but it's that overarching sense of be dignified in office and carry the nation well and be unifying in spirit and reach out. And I think that's what people... and again, that's important in terms of relations on the island. I mean, in terms of the future of the island, I think what's important is keep working on the reconciliation piece, because that's the hard work. And you did it with building bridges. And it's not... You won't have dramatic overnight sort of successes, but you will create trust. And I think things will evolve, but I think they have to be allowed to evolve a bit, and trust has to build up. Even within the North, trust has to build up in terms of politics working. Unfortunately, the institutions have been down too often in the past, which hasn't helped. Hasn't helped because people don't have a sense that politics works for them. And they need to develop that sense that politics works for them.
Then the important thing, it would seem to me, would be that there are going to be hard questions asked down the line, because the Good Friday Agreement provides for that big question, which is a big question, but the future of partition. But don't you want to be in a position that when that hard question is put, that there's enough trust that it can be talked about without breakdown, 100%. Without threat of violence, 100%. That people can have a moderated and a moderate conversation about a difficult subject?
Absolutely, that's where you want to be. Yeah.
And that's what your Shared Island Initiative is helping with too. Building up the neighbourliness, the friendships.
And also, you mentioned demographics. The more important, the new Irish in Northern Ireland as well.
Yes.
Younger people. I mean, there are problems with young people leaving Northern Ireland, some going to the UK and not coming back. That's a problem for Northern Ireland. And that's one of the
3 out of 4 who go to university there don't come back.
And one of the Shared Island initiatives is around early school leaving and school completion.
That's a disaster in
which
Northern
has always
Ireland.
been a thing for me, and I said we really have to deal with that, because a lot of people on the loyalist side feel marginalised. Rightly or wrongly, they feel they're not getting a dividend back. And I would have met them, and they feel now at the moment that they're actually losing out.
And there is more than an element of truth there. If you look at the stats on the number of young people, particularly on the loyalist side, who leave school early, between 2 and 3 times more leave school with nothing than anywhere else in the United Kingdom. It's extraordinary.
It is an extraordinary figure. It's a dangerous figure as well.
It's outrageous.
And it comes back to education was my first love.
Waste.
And I think every child deserves to go as far as they possibly can.
Said.
And you were saying earlier about the Leaving Cert applied.
Filled that gap.
The colleges of further education, for example, they've been a revelation.
Yeah, and the apprenticeships and all of that.
And people can move on then and they find their spot and then they can go wherever they want to go.
Sense they can be fulfilled.
But that needs to happen in the north
as well.
That was the big problem. In the past, that cohort always had the apprenticeships in the big old smokestacks and in the shipbuilding, all gone and filled in with nothing.
With nothing afterwards.
Filled in with nothing. And that's because those are the very kids who, coming out at 16, they still want the 800-pound runners. So what does that make them? It makes them fodder for the drug guys, makes them fodder for the paramilitaries. And that's a waste and a danger.
And I think that's a huge issue for all of us.
Yeah.
Staying with the subject of presidency and presidents, you recently met with President Trump.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, what was the big takeaway from that meeting for you, Taoiseach? And, with regard to our relations within the US?
A number of takeaways. Personally, he was gracious as a host. And in a nice way, he made it very clear he had issues with us in terms of pharmaceuticals, but he did it in the nicest way possible.
We love
very smart people, he said. Took all our pharmaceuticals. But it's a very serious issue, and we're going to have to navigate this very carefully. I also felt that the kind of press conference, if you like, call it much longer period in the Oval Office with the media around, is a fascinating insight into what is a new form of political messaging. And he really is political messaging to his base. And I think Europe and all of us just need to count to 10 every time something gets said in the Oval Office, not to be reacting every single day to every single event or comment. That's very important, that we try and discern a pattern of behaviour. So it's early days yet, and very early days if you think about it. But it's been shock and awe in terms of decisions every day and so on like that. And that's, I'd say, calibrated to be that way. But decisions ultimately have consequences. The biggest takeaway we have is this. Sorry, the other takeaway, he does like Ireland and he likes Irish America. I mean, the Oval Office, there's a number of events that day. You have the breakfast with Vice President Vance, and then you have the meeting, and then you have the handing over the Shamrock. There's about 600 people there from Irish America.
Yeah.
And they're all very proud.
What other nation gets that? What other nation gets that?
No one gets it. But then he's speaking to Irish America as well. So he's conscious of that constituency, which I took away saying the Irish American constituency is still potent. People are suggesting maybe it's demographically easy on. It's still very potent. And he was conscious he got a majority vote there.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but what we hope will happen is that he will not want to damage his own companies. And the tariffs, if they're too severe, will damage his own companies and American companies. By the sheer scale of them. They can't relocate overnight. But it could make life impossible for them in terms of pricing, for example. And so there are very serious consequences for us. The timeline for those consequences to hit us is not certain. Or if Europe can engage with the US presidency and in a dialogue process that leads to a resolution that will involve some pain, but not the excessive pain that could happen. Because I think tariffs will damage the whole world economy. So that takeaway of, there was a determination there this time. I think that in other words, there's a desire to follow through. The other takeaway is we met a lot of technology companies and we met a lot of other companies. They're not happy with tariffs. Most business in America wants certainty, stability, and they are concerned. So all that might influence things yet.
And ultimately, it's the consumer, the person who goes into the shop to buy the pharmaceutical product that is going to suffer as well.
Yes, and indeed I spoke to Katrina Perry, former RT, she's now with the BBC there, and I did an interview, but she was talking to me afterwards. Cost of living, she said, is phenomenal, and has been for the last year or two, and she feels would have been a very significant impact on the election. But it still is incredibly high. So if you add to that with more tariffs, particularly in medicine, then that will create further problems and in terms of access to drugs and medicines, and the sheer cost and price and impact on family.
If you had one message for the Irish people right now, what would it be?
Well, my message to the Irish people would be, one of the most important things we can do is to retain our sense of community and sense of community spirit. As I go on in life, I realise how important and central that is, because it protects our young people from all sorts of influences. People are worried about social media. People are worried about all those impacts. But when you go to any sporting club on a Saturday morning and you see parents and kids and children coming together, there's protection in that. And I think we have to try and develop that. We saw that during Stormy Owen, when everything collapsed, including communications networks. And suddenly you're in St. Bridget's GA Club in Roscommon and everyone's being showered there. And the officials said to me, actually, we have a generator for the lights and the pitch. We now need a generator for the clubhouse, because if we could permanently have this service in the event of future storms. Community is very important in Ireland. We're small enough. We've had a very strong, vibrant community, and we need to retain it. And I would say to Irish people, you know, the people have achieved a lot through their workplaces, through their commitment to society, an awful lot. And notwithstanding the challenges that are coming, and they are coming, you know, to keep on the optimistic side of life and to keep that sense of achievement that is part of the Irish persona. We do want, there is that sense in Ireland of wanting to improve, of wanting to do more. And I often joked when I was a minister, and I always remember there's one club came into me, they're good friends of me now, and they said, Minister, we have a dream. And I joked afterwards, we had to find $1 million for the dream, of course. And it's Blackrock Hurling Club in Cork. And it's
we have a dream, you're going to give us $1 million.
And I remember saying after, because it took a long haul, I said, look, Kevin, I said, the next person that comes into me and says they have a dream, I really go through them. I don't hear them. But actually, isn't that it?
Yeah,
do continue to dream, do continue to be ambitious for your children, and do continue to look at, and we see this on the Olympics and the electric tracks and so on like that, which is just wonderful to see.
Finally, Taoiseach, you're a GAA to the core, your family is GAA, your son Micheál is a star goalkeeper. And Cork for the All-Ireland, be it football or hurling?
I think so.
Of course you do.
Anthony Daly from Clare said, look, Cork will never be able to contain the hype this year, and he might be right, and I'm worried about that. No, but and by the way, could I just say, sport has been so valuable to our family. We talked earlier about the trauma we went through, like Micheál and Killian and Ava, all of them, three of them, like they took us through this early, because suddenly it was an age when they were playing inter-county at 16 and with the club Nemo Rangers, and they were our family too. So sport is just so important to us and brings us great joy and friendship and fun. So on the hurling, like last year, what's fantastic to behold with Cork hurling supporters is they're willing on the team. Last year they willed on the team. I was in Tullamore because it's quarter-final. The place was full of red and white, right? And it was the best economic day that Tullamore had in a long time, no doubt about it. Because Cork, and most towns will tell you, like, bring on the Cork team because the supporters spend. So there is that sense in Cork already. I mean, the league final was sold out in 24 hours. Wow. So there's really this pent-up appetite in Cork. But it's going to be extremely difficult. We've got to play Clare away in Ennis, in the Munster, and we've Limerick away. I mean, they're the two toughest games we had last year. And they were fantastic games. So there's nothing guaranteed here. And then Tipperary are back. They beat us in the league.
That's the drama, isn't it?
And so I think like Munster is going to be incredible. But they're playing at a level now, all teams, that hurling is really an incredible sport to watch. And the Gaelic footballers had a great win against Cavan. I was at the game. And I think Cork always surprise us in the football, but they also give us heart attacks repeatedly. But I can feel it when we're going, please God, we'll beat Limerick. Hopefully it will be a difficult game too, because Limerick have come up. And football has leveled out a lot at Division 2 and 3 level. But like, I often say in life, when you're brought up in my household, there are 2 Meccas, which you kind of feel you have to get every year to go to. Thurles for hurling and Killarney for football. And we won't be in Killarney this year, but the sight of Kerry people in the Kerry jersey does something to the Cork tribal cyclists.
And your women, of course,
The women have been,
LGFA
they've been the
and
stars.
Camogie are phenomenal.
They've been the stars.
Utterly.
Women football. And the Camogie.
Stars.
Camogie won last year.
Every
and
way. Stars
the 2
every
finals
way.
last year was both intermediate and senior.
Yeah.
Now your job is to unite all 3.
Correct. Yep.
That's another podcast.
Only 10,000 moving parts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're blessed. Cork is a wonderful sporting city. When I grew up in Turner's and Ballyphehane, there were people like Jimmy Barry Murphy and Dennis Allen and all of them. They played soccer, they played Gaelic football, they played with Cork Hibs, Cork Celtic, Cork won All Irelands, and dabbled here and there in sport. And it's that kind of city where it's multicodal and people are very knowledgeable about all sports. And that's one of its strengths. But definitely, no matter what sport you belong to in Cork, there's a pent-up appetite to try and win the Liam McCarthy. There's a lovely 1-minute thing on doing the rounds on social media at the moment. Micheál here. This is the first time since 1960 that Cork and Tip are in the league final. It's a clip in the old Cork Athletic grounds, the precursor to the Park Keeve. And Micheál here is setting the scene. Cork and Tipperary come out and field. There's 25,000 people or whatever here to see. And they're only here for one reason, he said, Christy Ring. And apparently my father would say to me, because they were great friends, he was a magnet. He said the Railway Cup were packed to capacity. Just people from other parts of the country who wouldn't ordinarily get a chance to see Christy Ring play would travel to see him play. So he was, and in Cork, he is the legend. When Micheál was 5, he was junior infants in Arcadia, and I said to him, look, I just want to say something to you. This is indoctrination. I said, I didn't tell him. Look, I said, no matter where you go in life, don't believe anybody who says there was a hurler better than Christy Ring. There was never a hurler better than Christy Ring. Anyway, a month later, Jack Lynch died in Arcadia. And I said to Micheál, look, a famous Cork man has died now. He won 6 All-Ireland medals and he was Taoiseach. He wasn't as good as Christy Ring, Dad. But I know he goes into school and the teacher says, no, boys, famous Cork man has died today. We're all going to say a prayer now for Jack Lynch. Up goes Micheál, his hand. Miss, everybody's praying for Jack Lynch. There's nobody praying for Christy Ring.
A big thank you, as always, to our producer, Enda Grace at Dundara Television and Media.
Our gratitude, as always, to our researcher, Anne-Marie Staunton, and to our sponsor, the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee, for their continued support.
If you are enjoying Changing Times, please don't forget to follow the podcast and perhaps give us a rating.
And from all of us here today at the Department of the Taoiseach in Government Buildings, Slán go fóill.
Changing Times, the Allenwood Conversations.
Sponsored by the Meadowlands Hotel in Tralee.
Hey, you know what would make your customer service help desk way better? Dumping it and then switching to Intercom. But you're not quite ready to make that change. We get it. That's why Finn, the world's leading AI customer service agent, is now available on every help desk. Finn can instantly resolve up to 80% of your tickets, which makes your customers happier and gets you off the customer service rep hiring treadmill. Finn by Intercom, the leading customer service AI agent, now available on every help desk.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.